Have you ever noticed how, in the midst of the world's biggest crises, there's always a small group of people who get insanely rich while the majority only feels fear? The tension between Israel and Iran may seem like a distant, overly political, and complicated scenario. But what if I told you that this conflict could be one of the greatest opportunities of the decade for young people just starting to invest? Yes, it sounds insane. But it's real. And in this video, I'm going to show you what smart investors are doing right now, before chaos turns into gold. If you pay attention until the end, you'll understand why crises like this change the lives of those who are prepared. And how you can be one of them. When a war approaches, most people's first instinct is to run, away from investments, away from the stock market, away from risk. But it's at this very moment that money begins to move silently, strategically. More experienced investors know that behind every tragedy, there are sectors that appreciate absurdly. In the case of the conflict between Israel and Iran, we're mainly talking about energy. Oil has already started to rise, and the defense industry, with companies receiving billion-dollar contracts. While everyone is fixated on terrifying headlines, the investors who act calmly and strategically are positioning their money in the sectors that grow the most during instability. It's not about taking advantage of pain, but about understanding the movements of the world and reacting intelligently. You might think, but I'm young, just starting out, I don't have money to invest in stocks or companies linked to oil and war. And here's the first mistake you need to eliminate from your mindset, thinking that investing is for rich people. Most people who are wealthy today started with very little. Some started with less than you have today. The secret lies in where you put your money, even if it's just a little. There are exchange-traded funds, called ETFs, that you can buy with accessible amounts. One of them is XLE, focused on energy. Another is ITA, linked to defense and aerospace. These funds gather various companies from the sector, reducing the risk for beginners. You don't need to know everything now. You just need to start looking where the money is flowing, and follow that stream. History repeats itself for those who know how to observe it. During World War II, companies like Boeing grew absurdly. After the September 11th attacks, the defense industry exploded. In every major global crisis, some sectors bleed, but others grow stronger than ever. And the greatest profits in history always arise amid confusion. Warren Buffett bought stocks while the world was sinking in 2008. Not because he's an isolated genius, but because he understands a simple rule: buy when everyone is scared. Sell when everyone is overly confident. As Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, in the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. And if you're hearing this now, it's because this phrase needs to become part of your mindset starting today. Let's imagine a simple situation. The world is like a chess game. When a war begins, it feels like the whole board gets flipped upside down. But in reality, the pieces are moving. Oil skyrockets. The dollar gains strength. Weapons companies receive new contracts. Energy becomes even more valuable. Meanwhile, most people are paralyzed. But those who know how to play watch the moves coldly. You can be that person. Even starting now, even with little money. Investing is not about having a lot, it's about knowing how to act first. While the rest of the world is too busy feeling afraid, you can use this moment to build the foundation of your financial freedom. There is an invisible force that moves the world's trillions of dollars, and it has a name: geopolitics. Most people only observe wars through the news and human tragedies. But those who truly understand money see conflicts as profound reconfigurations of economic power. The clash between Israel and Iran is altering the energy flow in the Middle East, which accounts for nearly 30% of global oil. This means that with every attack or retaliation, the price per barrel can skyrocket, and along with it, the profits of American companies involved in extraction, transportation, and storage of oil, natural gas, and derivatives. It's not just about oil itself, but about the infrastructure involved: pipelines, ports, refineries, ships, and protection technologies for these assets. And major institutional funds are already positioning themselves. Young investors who learn to map this silent movement of the big players can follow this trail with small investments in U.S.-listed assets, such as midstream companies, transportation and storage, and energy technology firms. The secret is understanding that behind every war headline, there's a billion-dollar dance. And those who dance along, even with little, come out much stronger. While drones explode, something much more silent happens behind enemy lines: cyber attacks. And in modern conflicts, those who dominate the digital space have more power than those who dominate missiles. Since tensions between Israel and Iran have escalated, cybersecurity companies have started to rise discreetly on stock exchanges. The reason? Every war today is hybrid. It happens both on the battlefield and on servers. And the United States is the global leader in digital protection solutions. For young investors, this opens an avenue of opportunities with companies like CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Networks, Fortinet, and Zscaler. These are companies that don't depend on physical presence in war zones, but whose billion-dollar contracts with governments and corporations surge during periods of instability. Investing in cybersecurity today is like having bought oil in 1973 or Amazon stock in 2001. You're anticipating the future. In a world where data is worth more than gold, protecting that data has become one of the most profitable and indispensable activities on the planet. When war alarms go off, the most experienced investors don't run, they migrate. And one of the most traditional destinations is the mining sector, not just because of gold, but because of so-called strategic metals. During conflicts, demand for lithium, niobium, copper, and uranium skyrockets, because these elements are essential for building military equipment, batteries, semiconductors, and next-generation defense systems. The curious thing is that many of these metals are exploited by companies based or listed in the United States and Canada. Attentive young investors can look for ETFs like REMX, focused on rare metals, or specific mining stocks like MP Materials or Energy Fuels. These assets tend to rise with every geopolitical escalation, especially when trade embargoes or logistical blockades affect the global supply chain. Those who understand the behavior of these assets during wartime not only protect their wealth, but multiply it while others only see instability. You might not know this, but the internet was born from military technology. The GPS you use on your phone, that too. And even the drones that now deliver pizzas started as silent surveillance weapons. Every war accelerates technological innovation because governments open their coffers to solve problems that would take decades in peacetime. In the US, this means billions of dollars being injected into private tech companies with military applications. We're talking about artificial intelligence applied to defense, real-time facial recognition, autonomous satellites, robotic exoskeletons, and new types of sensors. Investors who closely follow the public contracts of the Department of Defense can get ahead. Companies like Palantir, Raytheon Technologies, and even Amazon Web Services are increasingly involved in government projects. Investing in these areas is like betting on the infrastructure of the future, a future that, unfortunately, is being pushed forward by conflict, but one that can generate exponential returns for those who position themselves early. With the tightening of ties between Iran and armed groups in the Red Sea region, global trade routes have come under enormous risk. This has triggered a logistical race to find safer, faster, and cheaper alternatives. U.S. shipping, air, and rail companies have begun receiving massive contracts to reposition supply chains, especially for NATO countries. This means that companies like Union Pacific, FedEx, UPS, and even digital logistics players like Flexport are riding a new wave of demand. ETFs like IYT, Transportation, and XTN also capture this movement. What many young investors don't realize is that war directly affects the price of everything, from coffee to computer chips, and logistics becomes the most valuable bottleneck in the world. Investing in this sector now is like investing in infrastructure during the gold rush. It seems simple, but it's profoundly strategic. When a war breaks out, the first direct impact on the population is access to food. And with rising oil prices, the cost of fertilizers, transportation, and agricultural production skyrockets. What few investors notice is that this creates indirect value appreciation in agribusiness and food distribution stocks. Companies like Archer Daniels Midland, Bunge, Tyson Foods, and even John Deere become silent protagonists in moments like this. And for young investors, ETFs like MOO, Agribusiness, allow exposure to this entire ecosystem with just a few clicks. It's curious how hunger and fear impoverish those who aren't paying attention, but enrich those who know where to plant their money. While the world scrambles for the basics, you can harvest results simply by understanding that food becomes even more valuable in times of war. The war between Israel and Iran isn't just regional. It reignites global alliances and commitments, especially NATO treaties. This means that member countries, mainly Europeans, are significantly increasing their military budgets. Who supplies technology, equipment, and military consulting to these countries? Mostly U.S. companies. Lockheed Martin, for example, supplies not only to the U.S. but to over 40 allied nations. The same goes for Northrop Grumman, L3Harris, and General Dynamics. Young investors who understand this internationalization of the American defense industry can position themselves before the big peaks. What seems like just another Middle Eastern crisis is actually feeding defense budgets across the West. And this generates long cycles of contracts, profit, and dividends for shareholders. Finally, no asset in the world appreciates more than your own mindset. In times of war, the greatest enemy of a young investor is not the lack of money but the excess of panic. The human brain was programmed to avoid risk, to survive, not to invest. That's why so many people sell low, buy high, and repeat cycles of loss for decades. True wealth begins when you understand that the greatest profits in history were born during periods of uncertainty. Mastering your mind, studying, staying consistent, and being patient is more valuable than any stock. As Napoleon Hill said, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. You can choose to see war, or you can see a calling. A calling to grow, invest, learn, and change your financial story forever. And here's something practical. Open an account with an investment brokerage. Look for ETFs focused on energy, defense, and gold. Some of the most sought after today are XLE, ITA, and GDX. If you don't yet understand what they are, research after this video. How long will it take? 10 minutes? 15? But this knowledge can yield returns for years. Also, start following news from reliable sources about the conflict, not for the drama, but to understand which sectors are being most affected. Look at the charts. Study the movements. Don't be intimidated by the terms. Gradually, everything starts to make sense. Because what separates those who get rich from those who fall behind is the willingness to learn, act, and persist. I know it's hard. You see war, you see crisis, and everything you've been taught says, run from it. But actually, this might be the most valuable moment of your life as an investor. Because you're starting while the world is scared. And that's a huge advantage. When you invest at these times, you buy cheap. You get in before the herd. And when the world returns to normal, you're already ahead. That's the difference between those who repeat patterns and those who change their lives. And the choice is in your hands now. Warren Buffett has a phrase that sums it all up: be fearful when others are greedy. And greedy when others are fearful. Guess which phase of the world we're in now? Everyone is afraid. But you can have courage. Not impulsive courage, risking without thinking. But strategic courage, studying, understanding, and making decisions others will only make when it's too late. If you made it this far, congratulations. Because this video wasn't about war. It was about awareness. About seeing what no one else sees. About realizing that even without experience, even with little money, you can start building something that most will only understand years from now. Share this video with a friend who also needs to wake up to the world of investments. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell. And remember, the world out there may seem chaotic. But inside you, freedom has already been born. And it all starts with a decision. Today. With you.